It was a late Thursday night when I found myself in one of the most humiliating situations of my life. There I was, pants down to my ankles, overhearing a conversation that would change everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I had no clue what had been happening right under my nose. The laughter I heard wasn't just the casual banter of strangers, it was filled with smugness. These guys knew something I didn't. How could I, a grown man, have been so blind to what was going on with my own wife? One of the guys talking, Brian Thompson, was bragging to his buddy Matt, explaining in painful detail how he'd seduced my wife. It happened at a party just a few weeks ago, one I'd been at. I remember the night well, because while everyone was having a good time, I was called away to investigate a break-in at a local art gallery. Being an insurance investigator, that's my job, and I had no choice but to leave the party. I was gone for maybe 2 hours, but returned before the evening was over, none the wiser about what had happened in my absence. When I got back, my wife, Sarah, was sitting at a table with Brian and a couple of others. His boss, Don, and Don's wife were there too. There was nothing suspicious, or so I thought. I mean, I've been in this line of work for over a decade. If anything was off, I would have sensed it, right? But no. Everyone seemed to be having an innocent enough time. Now, I should give you some background. My name is Mark Evans, and I work for a top-tier security firm that handles high-value insurance claims. I've been doing this straight out of college, and at 38, I'd say I'm in the prime of my career. Most of my work revolves around theft investigations, but occasionally, I deal with car accidents or other incidents. I've built quite the reputation in the industry, often being contracted out to other companies for high-profile cases. Sarah and I have been married for 11 years. We have 2 kids, Emma, who's 10, and Lily, who's 8. Sarah works as a secretary for Don, who happens to be the president of the company I work for. She got the job after losing her previous one, and even though it was a bit complicated getting approval to work in the same company, we managed to make it work. Brian Thompson, the guy who now claimed to have slept with my wife, worked as an insurance specialist alongside Matt. They wrote policies for clients with big money, but I never really considered them friends, more like work acquaintances. I always got along well with their boss, Don. Anyway, what I overheard that night in the bathroom wasn't just small talk. It was the kind of conversation that makes your stomach drop. I was sitting there, feeling queasy from some bad seafood I had earlier, when Brian started bragging about how he'd hooked up with my wife. He was going into detail, every word twisting the knife deeper. He'd managed to get her tipsy at the party, and apparently, things went from there. He told Matt how he danced with her, flirted, and eventually took her to his car. That's where things got really heated, he said, and from the sound of it, my wife didn't put up much resistance. The worst part? He wasn't done with her. He had plans to meet her again the following Sunday, at a time when she was supposed to be getting her hair done. They were planning to spend the whole day together in a hotel room. I felt like my world was collapsing. I couldn't believe that Sarah, the woman I trusted with everything, was capable of this. But as much as I wanted to believe it was all a bad dream, I knew I couldn't just ignore what I'd heard. After hearing Brian's disgusting recount of the events, I left the restroom, trying to process everything. My mind was spinning. Could Sarah really have done this? I replayed that evening over and over in my head, trying to find clues I might have missed. When I got back to the party, Sarah had been sitting at the table with Brian, his boss Don, and Don's wife. She didn't seem drunk at all. She was talking to Don's wife about our kids, completely normal stuff. There was nothing out of the ordinary, or so it seemed. But now, everything felt suspicious. Why hadn't I noticed anything then? Could it really be true that while I was working, my wife had been sneaking around behind my back? The thought made my stomach churn. A week passed after the party, and I couldn't shake what I'd overheard. I watched Sarah closely, looking for any signs that might confirm what Brian had said. But she didn't act any differently. She was the same Sarah, laughing, loving with the kids, and never showing the slightest hint of guilt. One evening, I casually asked her, "What did you do after I left the party? Did you have fun?" She told me she just danced with a few people, chatted with Don's wife, and that was it. No mention of Brian or anything unusual. "I would have come home when you left, but you told me to stay and enjoy myself," she said. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So, I decided to test her. "Hey babe, what do you have planned for this Sunday?" "I was thinking about going golfing," I said one night while we were having dinner. "Oh, I'm getting my hair done," she replied without missing a beat. "I have an appointment right after lunch. It should take a couple of hours." Her answer matched what Brian had said to Matt. He knew about her hair appointment. How did he know that? Did Sarah tell him? The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, and it made me sick. But I wasn't about to jump to conclusions without evidence. I needed to know for sure what was going on, and I knew exactly how to find out. My job as an insurance investigator gave me access to some pretty advanced tools, and I wasn't afraid to use them for personal reasons this time. I spent the next few days preparing. I borrowed a surveillance van from work and installed a GPS tracker in Sarah's car. I also planted a small recording device in her purse. If she was going to meet Brian on Sunday, I would know about it. The GPS would track her location, and the audio would capture anything that was said. There would be no denying the truth once I had the evidence. By Friday, I had everything in place. I tried to act normal around Sarah, but inside, I was filled with dread. I wanted to believe that this was all some kind of misunderstanding, that she wasn't capable of betraying me like this. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. That Sunday morning, I kissed Sarah goodbye as she left for her hair appointment. I told her I'd be out golfing with some friends and that I'd see her later in the afternoon. In reality, I was parked a few miles away in the surveillance van, waiting to see where she would go. As I watched the GPS tracker, my heart sank. The dot on the screen showed her heading in the direction of Birch Road, where the motel Brian had mentioned was located. I couldn't believe it. She was really going there. I watched as the GPS signal stopped, right outside the Sunset Lodge Motel. My hands were shaking. This was it. There was no turning back now. I started the recording devices, sat back in the van, and waited to see what would happen next. Sitting in that surveillance van, I felt like time had stopped. Every minute dragged on painfully slow as I waited for more proof of what I was dreading. I kept my eyes glued to the GPS, confirming again and again that Sarah's car was still parked outside the motel. There was no way she was in there just to get her hair done. My heart was pounding, and all I could think about was what might be happening in that motel room. I debated with myself whether I should drive over and confront them, but I knew better. I had to be smart about this. The moment I charged in, it would all be about the heat of the moment. If I wanted a clean break, a divorce with no room for her to manipulate the situation, I needed cold, hard proof. As hard as it was to sit there, I knew this was my best shot. 2 hours passed. The audio recordings from the device I'd planted in her purse were coming in clear. I could hear faint voices, and though I couldn't make out everything, I knew enough. She was there with Brian. It wasn't until the GPS signal finally moved that I began to wrap my head around what I was about to do. Her car started moving again, leaving the motel. I tailed her at a distance to make sure she didn't see me. She drove straight home, as if nothing had happened. As if she hadn't just betrayed me in the worst way possible. I followed her all the way back, parked the van in a nearby lot, and walked into our home like any other Sunday afternoon. She greeted me with a smile, asking how my golfing went. "Good, pretty relaxing," I said, though my voice was barely holding steady. "How about your hair appointment?" "Oh, it was fine," she said, running her fingers through her freshly done hair. "It always takes a while, but you know how it is." I nodded, forcing a smile. It was taking everything in me not to explode right then and there. But I kept it together. I had to. That evening, she made dinner, and we sat around the table with the kids as if everything was normal. I couldn't believe the show she was putting on, acting like the perfect wife and mother after what she'd done just hours earlier. After the kids went to bed, Sarah tried to be affectionate with me. She even hinted at us spending some alone time together later. I couldn't stomach the thought of being with her, not now, not after what I knew. So, I faked being tired, said I wasn't feeling well, and went to bed early. She didn't push it, just kissed me goodnight like she always did. I lay there in the dark, trying to figure out how I was going to handle this. The next morning, I went straight to work and headed for the surveillance van. I pulled all the audio and video recordings and started reviewing them. My worst fears were confirmed. The video clearly showed Sarah arriving at the motel, meeting Brian, and walking into the room with him. The audio picked up enough of their conversation to leave no doubt about what was going on. It was more than enough to confront her, and more than enough to file for divorce. But I wasn't just going to confront her. I wanted to make sure Brian got what was coming to him too. He thought he could mess with my life and get away with it? Not a chance. I decided to meet with Don, Brian's boss, and let him know exactly what his employee had been up to. Brian's little game was about to blow up in his face, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. On Monday morning, I sat in my office replaying the footage. The evidence was irrefutable. Sarah and Brian had spent hours together at the motel, and there was no mistaking what had happened. I had everything I needed, but I wasn't done yet. I wanted to ensure that Brian paid for his part in all of this, not just by losing his job, but by facing the consequences of his actions in the workplace. I called Don, Brian's boss, and asked if we could meet for lunch. Don was always straightforward with me, so I trusted him to handle things once I laid it all out. As we sat down at the restaurant, I could tell he had no idea what was coming. After a bit of small talk, I got straight to the point. Don, I need to show you something. It's about Brian, and it's pretty serious, I said, pulling out my tablet. I played the footage of Brian and Sarah entering the motel together. Don's face turned red as he watched the screen. He was furious, not just because of what Brian had done, but because it was happening under his nose. I could see the betrayal hit him hard. He had trusted Brian, but now he realized the kind of man he'd been working with. Mark, I don't know what to say, Don muttered, shaking his head. This is unacceptable. I'll take care of it. And take care of it he did. By the end of the day, Brian was escorted out of the building. He had no idea what hit him. From what I heard, he tried to deny everything at first, but once Don played the recordings for him, there wasn't much left to say. He was fired on the spot, and his reputation was shattered. But even though Brian was out of the picture, I still had to face the hardest part, confronting Sarah. That night, I sat Sarah down after the kids went to bed. She knew something was up from the moment I walked into the house, but I could tell she had no clue about what was coming. I know about Sunday, I started, my voice calm but cold. I know you weren't at the salon. Sarah's face drained of color. What are you talking about? I know everything, Sarah. I know about you and Brian, the motel, everything. I've got proof, so don't even try to deny it. I handed her the GPS printouts and audio transcripts. The silence in the room was unbearable as she stared at the evidence. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then the tears started. Mark, I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. I don't know what I was thinking. I could see the guilt written all over her face, but that didn't make it any easier to hear. Was it just once? I asked, needing to know the truth. She hesitated, and that hesitation was all I needed to confirm that it wasn't. It was more than once, she admitted softly. I don't know why I let it happen. It just did. That was it. My heart broke all over again. 11 years of marriage, our life together, our kids, it was all shattered because of a string of decisions she had made behind my back. I can't do this anymore, I said quietly. I'll be filing for divorce. Sarah begged me to reconsider, saying she would do anything to fix things, that she still loved me, but I couldn't go back. The trust was gone, and without trust, there was nothing left to hold on to. I told her she could stay in the house for now, for the sake of the kids, but I was done with the marriage. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal for the kids while my marriage was falling apart behind closed doors. Sarah tried everything to win me back. Counseling, apologies, promises to change, but it was too late. The damage was done, and I couldn't see her the same way anymore. Eventually, I filed for divorce, citing infidelity as the cause. Sarah didn't contest it. She knew she was at fault, and I think deep down, she understood that this was the only way forward. We agreed to split custody of the kids, though that was the most difficult part of it all. I loved Emma and Lily more than anything, and the thought of not being with them every day crushed me. But I knew I had to do what was best for them, even if it meant sharing custody with the woman who had betrayed me. As for Brian, he never showed his face around town again. Word spread quickly about why he'd been fired, and no one wanted to be associated with him. His career was over, and from what I heard, his marriage wasn't far behind. It seemed poetic in a way, both of our lives upended by his selfish actions. In the end, I learned that trust is the foundation of any relationship. Once it's broken, no amount of apologies or promises can rebuild it. I moved on, focusing on being the best father I could be to my girls and rebuilding my life, one day at a time. Looking back, it's still hard to believe how quickly everything fell apart. But I've come to terms with it now. Life goes on even after betrayal. You just have to find the strength to pick up the pieces and start again. I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for watching my videos, sharing them, and supporting me along the way. Your views, comments, and likes are the driving force behind my passion to create captivating and unexpected stories. Every tale I share is more than just a plot. It's a journey of emotions, lessons, and reflections that we experience together. Your engagement brings life and soul to this channel. Thank you for sticking with me until the very end of each video because the finale of every story is where the real impact lies. I promise to continue delivering twists and turns that surprise, inspire, and resonate with your hearts.